Congress voted to build the United States National Archives building in 1926. Construction for the building began on September 9, 1931, and it was completed just over 4 years later in November 1935. Prior to the building's creation, the government did try to actively keep records, but there was no designated storage unit for them. In the decades before the building's construction, several esteemed architects who anticipated the need for such a building proposed drafts in the federal government. In addition to architects competing for the job, companies that sold granite and limestone, which were the most common materials for buildings at that time, were also competing to have their materials used for the project. John Russell Pope was asked to lead the project. In February 1933, after a year and a half of construction, the cornerstone was placed in a ceremonial fashion by President Hoover. Pope chose to use limestone instead of granite in constructing the building, which is because it could have been too heavy if it was made out of granite. At 900,000 square feet, the National Archives building reached its capacity in the 1960s. As a result, the U.S. federal government again approved a second National Archives building to meet the growing storage needs. In 1993, the construction of a second building in College Park, Maryland, was completed. This tripled the total amount of storage between the two buildings, which combined to hold 2.7 million square feet of archives.
The architecture of the Archives building is one of several in Washington which are modeled off of classical Greek temples. The Archives building has a granite base, while the rest is made out of limestone. Like a Greek temple, the Archives building is meant to be displayed from all sides. Surrounding the building are 72 large Corinthian pillars which appear to support the building, and 2 large pediments adorn the 2 main faces of the Archives building. Each pediment is 118 feet long and 18 feet high at the center. A large flight of stairs reminiscent of the Greek krepadomos leads to the Archives' mock entrance under the portico. This entrance has 2 large bronze doors that are about 40 feet high and 11 inches thick. Adolf Wyman designed the pediment seen on the Pennsylvania Avenue side of the Archives building. The depiction in Adolf Wyman's pediment displays several classical figures. The central Zeus-like one embodies destiny. Others embody the arts of peace, the arts of war, the romance of history, and the romance of the Song of Achievement. The second pediment was designed by James Earl Fraser. The central figure in this pediment holds the key to the archives themselves. Also seen in the pediment are winged horses and dogs. Surrounding the Archives building are 4 classical figures. They represent the future, the past, heritage, and guardianship. Each figure sits atop a pedestal, inscribed with a meaningful quote. The inside of the Archives building appears to be more of a composite of Greek and Roman architecture. The Archives building has a rotunda, reminiscent of Roman architecture, that is adorned with several octagonal cofferings in the roof. Corinthian pillars can also be seen inside the rotunda that holds the Bill of Rights. Between some of the rooms, arches are present, which are more reminiscent of the Roman architectural forms.
The National Gallery of Art was officially created in 1937 and given as a gift to the American people from financier and collector Andrew Mellon. Mellon was a keen collector of art. He began collecting paintings and sculptures during the First World War. After coming to Washington in 1921, his collection only became more ambitious. At this point, however, his collecting was aimed towards the establishment of a national gallery. His assembly included the works of such artists as Jan van Eyck, Raphael, and Rembrandt. After acquiring 42 works in a single transaction with a prominent art dealer, Mellon donated his collection to the nation. Andrew hoped the creation of the National Gallery would attract gifts from other notable collectors. This was soon realized when major donations began to come in from hundreds of other donors. Over time, this would become the museum's source of survival. The entirety of the collection has been donated and every work has been paid for by private donations from generous individuals or foundations. After a few decades, the collection was growing so successfully and rapidly that the museum had to be expanded. In 1978, the east wing of the building was added. Interestingly enough, the funds for this building were provided by Paul Mellon, the son of the initial financier, Andrew Mellon. In 1999, the gallery opened an outdoor sculpture garden open to the public at all times. The garden was designed to provide an informal yet pleasant environment for the work of both modern and contemporary sculptors. The National Gallery of Art is hailed as having one of the largest and most impressive collections of art in the entire world. The gallery boasts paintings, sculptures, prints, drawings, and photographs, with paintings being the most extensive. The work of Thomas Cole can also be found at the National Gallery, specifically his famous series titled The Voyage of Life. The library is also recognized as one of the most important and extensive collection of images in the world. In addition, it maintains a rare book room and includes monographs of thousands of artists.
The entrance to the west building of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. resembles a Roman temple. More specifically, it resembles the most famous of the Roman temples, the Pantheon. The Pantheon is a great temple in Rome that was built and dedicated in the honor of all the gods and goddesses of ancient Rome. The west building resembles the Pantheon with its large columns, pediment, and rotunda behind it. The columns' capitals are true to the Ionic order with volutes, but the columns in the west building are not ribbed according to this order. This is because the architect, Pope, designed the building according to the neoclassical style. The pediment, the triangular shape, sits above the columns. It is usually filled with sculptures depicting monumental scenes, but on this building they are absent. This building is more similar to Roman style versus Greek style because of its use of arches and the rotunda. The Greeks relied on a post and lintel form of structure, which meant that ceilings of buildings had to be flat. It was not until the Romans revolutionized the use of the arch that buildings were able to have curved ceilings. Their use of arches can be seen in the design of the rotunda today.
Work it, make it, do it, makes us harder, better, faster, stronger.
That don't kill me, can only make me stronger. I need you to hurry up now, cause I can't wait much longer. I know I got to be right now, cause I can't get much stronger. Man, I've been waiting all night now, that's how long I've been on ya.